So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time today to join us in this very interesting conversation. So what we wanted to do is to talk a little bit about how business is going in this unusual time. And we have a variety of people scheduled on different topics, but we really wanted to do a big one on co-working, and what better conversation partner or presenter for that than Monika, who actually works, she's tuning in from London, and she works for Nexudus. She is the head of sales there, and they're helping co-working spaces to streamline their operations with a great solution. We actually use Nexudus at Live It as well. And she has a bit of an overview of what's happening in the world. They've been collecting some data. They've been having some interesting conversations. So thank you so much, Monika, for taking the time to do this with us today. And we're very excited to hear what you have to share with us. The floor is yours.
No worries. I'm really excited as well. So let me share the screen. I have a presentation to show you a bit of data. Okay, can you see my screen? Correct one with the presentation?
Yes. Perfect.
Yes. Okay, fantastic. So obviously we will be talking here about the co-working. I know that some people here are interested in co-living, and co-living is a bit different business, so we will not dive into it. But we will be talking specifically on this industry. So many of us already are in co-working industry, like connected in some way. So we all remember this excitement in 2019, right? So we all knew how the co-working will go, how it will grow, and then the pandemic has happened, unfortunately. So we just want to kind of figure out whether this is the end of the co-working that we know today, and how the co-working will look like, right? So we all know that this is not the end of the story, but how it will look like basically eventually. All right, so why do I even talk about the co-working, right? So who am I? Most of you know me already. So I'm a part of Nexudus team, and Nexudus is basically providing a solution for the co-working spaces to manage their everyday operations. So we are working with more than 2,000 spaces in more than 90 countries in the world. So we have quite an expertise, and me, myself, I'm joining different webinars, and I'm working with different groups, going to the conferences. So we all hear about this, and we just want to share what we know with you today. Okay, so let's start from this very beginning. So how it was before, how excited we were in 2019. Like I remember we were in Bali already in 2020, so it was a bit different vibe at that moment. The conference was amazing, Steve. But what we need to think about is how the perspective in 2019 was. So I remember last conferences we were in Europe, in Warsaw, and how it has changed and what is the effect of pandemic on co-working industry. So from this data, you can actually see that by the end of 2020, there was predicted to be almost 26,000 of spaces worldwide. And the growth was incredible. So every single year, more than 2,500 new spaces would open. So that's completely new businesses that would actually open their doors. And what was also interesting, that most of this growth was led by the new co-working spaces. So by new co-working spaces, I mean completely new, usually local businesses, while only 35% was the spaces who were growing by opening new locations. So that means that they were, we can see also from Nexudus regarding the people who were interested in our software, there was a big flow of completely new businesses starting it, people who even didn't know what co-working exactly is. So there was this point in time when on the conference we had real estate investors, right, coming in, who were not fully understanding what co-working is for people. So at some point, every 5 days, a co-working space opens in London. So that's crazy when you think about that. They were completely new co-working spaces on every street. Just to compare, in New York, it was about every 7.5 days, while in Asia Pacific, the top cities were Melbourne every 20 days, every 23 days, Sydney, Manila from Philippines, Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and Bangalore in India. So that's quite interesting data. We have seen opening co-working spaces literally daily worldwide. And to be honest, co-working became mainstream. So we are all on the webinars, and there are people saying that they opened the co-working space in 2006, for example, when no one knew what co-working is. And now co-working is a new normal. So everyone knows what co-working is. At least they know WeWork, which we know that was very successful eventually. But there are so many small companies who are actually running successful co-working spaces, local in rural areas. And this data is quite interesting. So you can see that 1 in 7 workers currently use co-working spaces. And those workers that were asked here were actually workers of larger companies that hire more than 100 people. So flexible workspaces and co-working isn't anymore for only people who are freelancers, who are small startups, for creatives. I mean, they are for them, and this is why they have started. But at this moment, the co-working is a mainstream. So many people know about this. Everyone at least has been in one of the co-working spaces, and many large companies have actually their employees going to the co-working spaces. So in 2019, we were talking about 40% of demand for the flexible workspace would be driven by large and corporate companies, including Facebook, Adidas, Microsoft. All of those companies would actually consider co-working as a part of their workforce day. And here, I actually want to kind of engage you guys a bit more, because I will be showing you in a second what, according to the survey, are benefits of the co-working. So why it became a mainstream, why we have seen this all grow. So if you can type in chat what, according to you, the co-working benefit was. So specifically maybe for you, or maybe you've heard some other people saying that. If you can share it with us, I'll just open the chat. Okay, community, fantastic. Yeah, community, that's very important. Good internet. Oh, that's important with in Bali, I guess it's quite crucial as well. Events, cross-pollination of ideas, fantastic. Some more, guys? Other people, all right. Internet, that's why I joined Ubud, internet, I see. Yeah, internet is one thing. So now when we are working from home, we all see that, right? The internet is really important. Okay, social contacts, network, great common areas to meet people. Yeah, fantastic. You see that, except internet, which is one side, so it's basically technology. The second part is actually social aspect, right? Collaboration opportunities, I can see. All of those are connected to people, events, networking, collaboration. All of these are people talking to each other, feeling of belonging, learning, I see, finding your new partner, co-founder, employee, contractor, freelancer, new ideas. All of this, yeah, learning. All of this is mainly connected to other people, because you learn from other people, you connect to other people. So let's look at the data. Thank you guys for the input. Let's look at the data. It's from 2015, but I think it's super relevant. So you can see that 89% of responders felt simply happier in the co-working spaces. They just felt happier. And why they felt happier? Because they felt less lonely. 83% of people felt less lonely, right? Then we have another one, 73% co-working helps responders keep sane. I mean, nowadays we know how important it is, right? But there are other benefits. So the networking, right? So 82% said co-working has expanded their professional networks. They had other members for the help and guidance. They felt more successful. They felt like they actually were more motivated, engaged. They improved their professional success. So this is all the real data from the survey asking people how they feel. And this is exactly what you add. I see Steve added, reason to get out of my pajamas. Well, today is the day also, the reason, you know, good Zoom calls like this, at least the upper part, right? The buttons no one can see.
Exactly. Let's not pretend we're doing the full thing, right? Like it's always only the top part.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, fantastic. So yeah, you can see that the co-working has so many different benefits. But now the pandemic happens, right? And honestly, those benefits means. So this, let me come back to this data. So this is Small Business Labs research. So as I remember, it was mainly in the US. So the data that I'm showing is mainly from the US and Europe, because we are based in Europe and most of our customers are also based in the US. We have a very strong presence in Asia as well, but from what I see, mostly the data is from the US. So this is a very good question. I can send you later maybe a couple of links. I don't know if Livit will be sending after that some sort of newsletter maybe to participants, so then I can include the information where I got this data from.
Yeah,
all right, fantastic.
Can.
Okay, so okay, the lockdown happens. So now there's all social benefits that we can see. There's all, I mean, from one part, it doesn't matter anymore because we social distance. For another part, it's actually a bit of enemy of co-working spaces. So all of these social interactions that you are all based on in the co-working spaces is now being disrupted. And the 30% that I show here is data from Nexudus. So we have implemented a small form in our panel, and the co-working spaces could choose whether they are completely closed, whether they are open only for members, whether they have some virtual memberships. And 30% of the spaces worldwide, we are talking about those 90 countries that we serve, were closed. That's a lot. That's almost 1/3 of the spaces, right? And you can see here some data about how it was affected. So you can see on the right that 72% of the spaces said that they felt the significant drop of numbers of co-workers. So this is the co-worker survey. So co-worker is a global aggregator of the co-working spaces. Then we see on the left what are different effects, right? So we see the event cancellations. That was the biggest effect. Meeting conference rooms cancellations as well. Membership cancellations. So this is almost 40% of spaces were affected by that. Space closure. So globally it's 20%. In Nexudus it's 30%. So they are mainly focusing on the US and Europe as well. So the data is a bit different, but you see the idea that was a big chunk of the co-working spaces that were actually physically closed. And sick members. I mean, that's also a problem, right? So some spaces actually had sick members coming to the space. I haven't heard that example from our customers, fortunately, because most of the co-working spaces closed early enough and prevented that early enough. But I guess that was a cause in some countries that didn't react early.
To be honest, for us, we did have a wave of either, it could have been Corona, but it could have been like a flu or something else. We didn't know, which was early on, before most of the other spaces closed. This was right after CU Asia, so early March. And this was actually one of the reasons that we decided, we were like, we don't know what this is, but we have a few people that are, I don't know, they seem to be having a cold or whatever, and you just don't want to play with those things, right? So so we have no idea if it was COVID or not, but it was one of the reasons that spurred us to take definitely a very immediate action.
Yeah, I felt that many co-working spaces have closed even before the government said to close their premises, because again, co-working spaces are really human-centric. So, and I see that there is a great care about their members. So professionally, the co-working spaces just wanted to act as fast as possible and figure out the way what to do now. So when you close your premises, what to do. And actually, I would want Lavinia to jump in here, because co-working goes virtual, and I have seen that Live It did it very well, going virtual. So all the virtual events, all the happy hours, and so on. So Lavinia, can you give some examples, because I have seen, and I reached out to you after I've seen one of them.
Yeah, sure. We did a bunch of things. So we transitioned a lot of the things that were happening online, like coffees and sharing is caring events, skill shares, and even workouts. So we partnered with we do have yoga and workouts at the hub usually, which is a part of the membership that people really love, actually. So we were like, now obviously we can't do that on our rooftop. How are we going to do that? And we partnered with a former member actually that created a Live It Fit from Home program, so people can do it either with calling other few people, and just being like, oh, do you want to work out at the same time on Live It Fit from Home or whatever. So we offered that opportunity. We did all of this online events like this, or more, let's say, kind of informal, where we pair people with Donut on Slack, right? And people talk peer to peer, or we have a wider group. And we also did a few other things, such as a package that is called Premium Work from Home, where people can book a chair and a meal delivered to their house and whatever. So to create that kind of a semblance of co-working, but from home, and plugging into all the other group activities and so on. So we've been trying very hard to recreate that experience online.
Yeah, I really loved it. And I especially the premium co-working, I have seen that. I haven't seen that much in other spaces, so that was definitely original concept. I mean, Fiona is directly connected with the ministry, and in the ministry, for example, because it's creative space, they have DJ events and all sorts of, because they co-workers are the creatives. So Fiona, I don't know if you can give a couple of examples. That's also great.
Yeah, so they tried to basically do stuff that was along the same lines of the physical events. So because they're part of Ministry of Sound, we had Friday afternoon, sort of all afternoon DJ sets
I love
going
this one.
on. It was quite fun. Same to you in terms of wellness. So they already offered yoga, so we had yoga by Zoom, which was good, and just trying to do some of those things to keep going, but very, very much on brand. Yeah,
because it's essentially those creative that were working in the co-working spaces were actually doing those events as well. So that's great. And I want to show you one example which I really loved, which is concierge plus video for just $19. And the short version of this is COVID-19. And it emerged just after pandemic has started, and I love this idea. So they kind of came to this with a humor, and they do all of sort of virtual membership, right? Which is basically email handling, drive-by printing, concierge services, we do whatever you need, really, in this time. So we are your man. You can stay home safe, and we are your man. Of course, still caring for your own employees as a co-working space, but making it happen for your members too. All right, fantastic. Okay, so I want to kind of tackle also the fact that the co-working spaces gathered in community. So you are all community makers in the co-working spaces, and those community makers needed a community at that point because their businesses were closing. They needed to handle all this pressure to not only keep themselves sane, but also helping their members, which is quite hard because you yourself need to be a strong person to help another person to survive this. And for example, I am a participant of the London Co-working Assembly, and essentially the problem is that we've noticed that some governments want to help co-working spaces to thrive still in this environment, but some government didn't recognize co-working as a vital part of the business infrastructure. Co-working spaces create jobs, a part of making people happy. They revived the high street in the cities, and government didn't see it this way. So many co-working spaces were handling very hard times because obviously the renewals and contracts were dropping, and the revenue was dropping as well. But still, they needed to pay the landlord's rent because that's usually the case. If you have your own building, that's maybe easier. But many co-working spaces in the cities, they have a long lease with landlords, and you needed to pay still. So that's why we in London we gathered in London Co-working Assembly, and the big shout out for Bernie who was organizing that. Essentially, we have created a website which is called Save Our Local Co-working, which basically shouts out to the government that the co-working space is the same as hospitality and retail business need help. Because in the UK, government was quite active in keeping businesses surviving the pandemic. I don't know whether that's the case in Asia, but in the UK, basically they sort of missed out that the co-working spaces are also needing help. So this is what we are trying to do. We have a social campaign now. So basically the operators of co-working spaces gathered together, sharing their experience and trying to make it happen, trying to get some help from the government to survive this time until they can reopen. All right, so now lockdown is easing, right? So we see it already. It's melting slowly. So in many countries, people actually came back to the offices. So now what? Like we are all at home for weeks, right? Are we coming back to the cubicle? What do you think, right? Are we coming back to this cubicle? Chandler wasn't very happy there, so I'm sure we wouldn't be as well. But fortunately, not necessary. So being on those all calls, this is an example from Northern Ireland of one of our customers. Being on those calls, we realized that the co-working industry is super flexible. I mean, co-working industry is based on flexible offering. So yourself as a business owners, they are flexible and adapting to the business needs of their customers or to the environment. So co-working spaces came up with the solution how to keep social distancing in the space without coming back to the cubicles. So still keeping the open spaces, but rather using a plexiglass. So you can see here, that's the plexiglass in this middle photo, which basically separates people's faces from each other. Adding a bit more sanitization, adding, for example, nanoseptic surfaces. So the nanoseptic surfaces are basically surfaces that are cleaning themselves for X amount of days. So you don't need to clean them constantly. They prevent viruses and bacteria staying there. And also a lot of signage and a lot of messages to members, because we are all adults, right? And we all know what social distances is about. So as long as you will make it easy for members, the co-working operator set, that will be quite easy to do. And it's already working. So obviously with solution like Nexudus, you can limit the capacity of the building. So you can make sure that there will be less people coming to your space. So people can stay actually 2 meters apart, but by the signage and making, like, for example, one-way corridors, it will make it even easier for them to do that. Do you have any comment on that? I don't know, because I know that you will be probably implementing some things to come back to the office. I don't know if you want to relate to that.
Yeah, we are actually thinking to allow a limited amount of people to go back to the hub next week. Fortunately, we have a huge space, so there's a lot of space, and that allows people to really socially distance very generously. Still, we're only gonna, we put a cap on the number of people that, that can come. They'll be doing bookings the day before. And then there's also a certain number of people that can be on each floor at any given time. And obviously a plethora of hygiene sort of bits, including being very mindful of things like cutlery and sauces that people use, ketchup and stuff like that. We've been thinking about all of those things that like multiple people touch. And we're going to also, our building is very, has the advantage of having windows on literally all 4 sides. So we're going to be airing, like having a fresh airflow every few hours. These are some of the things that we're doing, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, there are different ways, obviously, and the most important is to reduce a bit capacity. So this is what you will see probably in the future. This is how co-working spaces will look like, with a bit reduced capacity. So not like before that people were basically sitting near each other quite closely. I mean, that wasn't the case in many of co-working spaces, but essentially people a bit social distancing, having their own private space. I know that we don't have much time, so I just want to touch on whether, okay, we are doing whatever we can to actually bring people back in and make them feeling safe. But the question is whether employees will want to return to an office setting, right? Because we all felt this remote working, which maybe in Bali, it is not that significant, but in London, as an example, remote work makes it so much easier. You don't need to commute. And in London, you commute basically about 1 hour each way in crowded spaces. It's really terrible in the underground. So you have less commuting, you have lower life costs, you have more time with your family. So all of this actually made people happy about being remote. 80% of the people surveyed claimed that they would be more productive while being remote than being in the offices. And still, I mean, we can see here basically how the remote working has a positive effect. And you know that many people didn't have very good conditions to work at home. So they have kids, spouses, and so on. So they definitely miss this sort of like very calm environment. But for many people, for example, like me, working from home wasn't much different from what I was doing in the office. The difference maybe was that I wasn't commuting, which was saving me a bit of time. But the good news that many of people who are actually now social isolating, they want to come back to the co-working space that they used to use. So on the left, you can see this is basically a question whether people who used to regularly work from the co-working spaces, whether they will want to come back to them. And 71% said that yes, they would like to, while the people who didn't use regularly, 55% would love to use co-working spaces when they will come back to work. Because this data is also based on the remote workers from the big corporations. For them, there was, for them, the other alternative is basically joining to, coming back to the big building, to the big office where it's crowded, when it's risky actually, and where often companies don't know how to handle the sanitization and coming back to the office. So while co-working spaces, the moment when they close, they already knew that they need to think about how they will come back with all of these customers in mind. The offices are not really prepared well for that, like the companies specifically. So the prediction is that many of the corporate and big companies will not want to come back to those big buildings with the big offices. They will probably split into smaller local hubs, and they will probably let at least some of their staff to work remotely. And by remotely, we mean not necessarily in their homes, because many of them, they don't have, yeah, exactly, good internet at home. That's the one part, right? So they will basically, and we see it already, they will request the membership in the co-working spaces that are closer to their employees. So they don't need to commute, they still have all of those benefits of remote work, but they will have a professional environment where it's safe to work and it's productive to work as well. So this is what we can see. We can't see this data as yet because obviously, I mean, I have found a couple of articles of co-working spaces from both Asia, from both US and the UK, saying that they have seen surge in the inquiries recently because basically the corporate and big companies notice that this is something that they need to look at. So just to summarize how the co-working will look after the pandemic. So we already know that at least for a while, there will be lower occupancy levels and less dense spaces. There will be more sanitization. They will be still social focus because we don't come back there just for a desk, right? We come back to see those benefits, to feel those benefits, to feel happier, to connect with other people, 2 meters apart, but still. They will stay both physical and virtual. So I don't think the co-working spaces will actually drop the virtual activity because many of their members will still not be able to come back to co-working spaces for a while. So keeping both physical environment in events and virtual, I think that will be crucial. They will be also more locally based. So we were talking about 65% of the new grow of the grow are the new co-working spaces. Those all will be local. Those all will be rural as well. So based in some remote spaces where people can go relax and unveil their creativity. They will be also more corporate focused, serving the regional hubs of the corporates. So the customer will change. The customer will be more corporate, will be full-time employee working from time to time in the co-working space. Yeah, the people basically who used to use the co-working space, not that regularly, but now they will be actually regular customers. So yeah, that's all from me. Here you can see my my email and my LinkedIn profile. So if you want to connect, feel free. I don't know if there are any questions or you want to add anything to the presentation. I'm happy to dive in.
Yeah, I mean, we'd like to invite everybody if they have a question or a thought. I see the chat section has been pretty active, so feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and contribute to the discussion. This has been really interesting, and I do think that the like co-working as a movement is such a big part of, it's not just gathering in a space, people who work for different businesses and taking advantage of the, you know, community and internet and everything. It's bigger than that. It's a huge contributor to moving towards the future of work, which looks quite different from how work looked like 5 or 10 or even a few years ago, let alone 30 or 40. And I think in many ways, there's so many different connections that we can see there, right? A lot of governments are starting to get very interested in promoting remote work and promoting like digital abled jobs, right? And everything. And the co-working community can be a driver for that, can be the co-working members and the co-working operators can be the workforce that shows the world how to work remotely, and not only work remotely, but work flexibly and come up with creative ideas that are lean and you make them happen online and everything. It's so much more than just the physical part of co-working. So I loved your title, your proposal for that, because I do think that in the short term we are definitely suffering, and it's not an easy time to go through because we depend so much on these memberships and everything. But on the longer term, co-working can come out of it not only as a survivor, as you're saying, but thriving and leading the way, actually.
Yeah, I agree definitely about that. And more people will probably notice that the co-working is the future. And we will not be talking about the co-working in the terms of WeWork anymore, because we will be talking about co-working as the local co-working, all the regional hubs that we have near us who are serving our local community.
Correct.
Fantastic. Thank you. I don't know if I don't see any more questions. And I know that I took a bit more time than I should, but thank you for this opportunity of showing.
Okay, we started slightly late. Thank you everybody for taking from your time. I know we have a variety of time zones and different different nationalities, and I think looking through the list, we've got London, we've got Spain, probably we've got Canadians in London, we've got Uwe, where are you right now?
Bulgaria, actually. You know, like Co-working Bansko, I run Co-working Bansko, or I did run Co-working Bansko. So Bulgaria is the choice of the COVID thing right now.
Good choice.
Correct.
Good choice, a place to hang out.
You know, like I have a mountain behind me, and I can walk in the woods and so on and so forth. So I have all this nature around me. It's really, really cool. Yeah. Unfortunately, co-working is suffering a lot. You know, nobody's traveling. We depend on digital nomads. We opened again, and we do now this social events again and workshops and so on and so forth. But it's tough times, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for saying that, Uwe. Yeah, it's definitely a tough one, especially for people who rely on people who travel, right? Because there are spaces that, even if they're for let's say the expat community, is expat community where those people live, right? And a part of our community is expats, part of us.
That's right, Levina. And also, you know, like I'm actually interested in because, you know, like we have memberships, like monthly memberships, and since everybody locked up at home, so also this fell away. So like people said, yeah, I'm at home, I'm not going to the co-working space. Co-working space is closed anyway. I'm not paying membership on top. Who has actually had also this issue, you know, not even that the travelers don't come, but also current members did not do any memberships anymore.
Correct. I would guess a lot of spaces, at least for those 2 tough months there, right? Like part of March, maybe 10 days or so of March, and then April, and so I think everybody was really worried. And even if I know people who had a paying membership and they still didn't want to go anywhere, they even, like, I know colleagues of ours in the co-working space, that industry, that operators, right, where they were saying, like, I have a few members who are still paying their membership because they want to keep this going. They want to be able to come back once it's over, but we're still closed. They're still not coming, right? So it's definitely very real.
Yeah, I think it depends also how you tackled it at the beginning. Obviously, when the months go by, it's harder and harder to keep those members, because, I mean, I know that, for example, nurseries are also still charging for people who don't bring kids in. The difference is that you basically discount this membership, and you need to explain the members. It depends how close you are to the members, because you can explain them that you love our staff, right? And we need to pay our staff. So this will cover our staff and survivors. So when it's all over, they can come back to the same environment, to the same people they love, right? Because that's why you charge this membership at this moment, not to profit really, but to make sure that when people will come back, there will be something to come back to.
To keep the doors open, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, if I may, in here, going back to what I was saying earlier, the fact that we are a force for that can push and pull towards the future of work, and how that looks and how it's different and everything. And for example, in our case, we've been kind of upskilling some of our team members to kind of deliver trainings online in those ways. And then we've also been helping a university and an internship program to transition to remote, which we know a lot about. We've been teaching Balinese, Indonesian and Balinese people how to work online during this time. So there are a few things. I think if we think more broadly, we don't just think co-working, we think that we are part of this wider movement that does all these other things. We can get our team members to do a lot of interesting things that serve the community in a different way than just the co-working space itself. And we've been trying to do that, but it's not easy to pivot just like that, and it's not easy to just start making a lot of money from that to replace your income, right?
Yeah, we have seen, so if the co-working space has a bit of private offices, so that's much easier to keep. This revenue is much easier to keep because obviously like even Nexudus, right? So we have an office in the shared office space and we are still paying for it, discounted because we are not using it, but we're still paying for it because we have all our stuff there. So, I mean, we can't say that we need to stop paying completely because, I mean, our things are there, so it doesn't work this way. But yeah, I mean, so that's also another takeaway, maybe having a small area of one person or two people, like small private offices, which if the co-working for some reason doesn't work out, or maybe there's still social distances, you have this stable, small, but still income that can keep you going. And this is what I have seen. So the spaces that have more private offices were doing much better than people who had only co-working. Some of the co-working spaces, they just, at the moment when they closed, they stopped charging immediately. So there was no revenue whatsoever. And now I have seen those people on the calls. So that's really sad. And for them, it's really very, very hard to survive.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's all case by case, right?
Yeah, but I feel that we are now coming out from the lockdown, and while some people are not comfortable in coming back, some people are really eager to be back, whatever they've been. So I feel like we will be slowly coming back, and hopefully we can keep this at least like 50% occupancy level for the next couple of months once we have the vaccine, and then we can come back to normality. I'm sure everyone is waiting for that.
I actually have a short question, if you could. Do we still have time? Is it okay?
Sure. I would just thank everybody now for joining, and if anybody needs to drop out, thank you, Steve, and thank you, everybody. And then those who are interested in staying longer, please feel free to do that.
Okay. Just my question is basically about social distancing, right? Right now, what we're discussing is like how to survive through this period. But what I want to know about is more of like long term. Do you think this social distancing is going to become the new norm? If not, like, will we ever go back to like how it was pre-pandemic? And if so, like, how long do you think this whole period might last, you know?
I would be very, very cautious to call it social distancing. Rather call it physical distancing. So this describes better what you want to do. And also because co-working, you want to connect to people, right? Not to distance. So, and I think this is a very important difference to make.
Absolutely. That's a very good point. That's a very good point. I would chip in here and say that I think it's going to depend a lot on if we're going to have a second wave and how bad that's going to be. I think if we do not have a second wave in most places, people will slowly come back to normal. There will be, I think everybody talks about a vaccine. I think even an effective treatment, vaccines take a long time to produce because they use organic matter. So you need to produce this like cells basically in laboratories. And that's why even if there is a vaccine that is found, it's going to take a long time to manufacture it. But treatments, if you find an effective treatment that kind of stops the more severe symptoms, that could be faster, right? So if we're able to develop something like that and there isn't a significant second wave, I would say that this past few months because it's all about emotional memory, right? Like all of this will like slowly fade away. If we do have a very bad second wave, which I believe it's entirely possible for certain countries, specifically for the US, for example, that is some places are opening way too early and everything. I think it can become like, it can emotionally scars people for a long time, and it can become, as you're saying, more of a new normal.
Yeah, I agree with that. We are social animals after all, so I can't imagine people are coming back to the office just for the sake of a desk. They come back for other people, and earlier or later, we will just come back to what we used to be. And basically like interacting. Who doesn't want to hug their friends? You know what I mean? We all miss that. And when we will feel safe, we will come back to doing it. The question is how long it will take. And I don't think anyone knows that. Even like governments don't know that. So it's very hard to predict.
Okay, maybe like not how long, but like how long do you think like it will be? Will it be in terms of, let's say, 3 months, right? No, I mean, I think this question could be open to everybody because everybody's facing it in different ways in their different companies. So is it like, 3 months, or is it going to be a year, or do you think it's going to be like 5 years, like, that kind of range? What is everybody's like consensus upon that? Yeah.
I have seen that. Oh, yeah, sorry.
That's all right. I was going to say, I think you're looking at a year.
I feel like the same. So the companies, like the bigger companies, already told their employees to not come back to the office for the whole year until the end of 2020. So they predict that already. And yeah, again, like Lavinia said, if there will be a second wave in winter, then it may take a bit longer.
I mean, it's really strange that, I mean, the whole thing is just surreal, but I think, we're all basically hinging all of our hopes on vaccine development. And I think that's the holy grail for this one, because nothing else seems to be a long-term solution, because it seems like it's just going to sit there, even at low levels, and then keep kind of having waves of spikes. So I think we're all just sitting there praying for a vaccine.
Same.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very happy to connect with you all. And thank you for gathering from such diverse places and backgrounds and businesses and spaces and so on. Thank you, Monika, for all the great information that you shared with us. And let's stay connected. Let's find each other on LinkedIn or otherwise. And we look forward to having you back in one of our future events.
Perfect. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you very much
Lavinia,
for
for organizing it. Thank you. Have a lovely day.
Ciao.
You too.